Hi, I'm Gabriella, welcome to my channel. I thought today would be a bit interesting to talk about boarding school and what it's really like, because no, it's not like Hogwarts that much. And also just because there's been a bit of scandal really going on recently with parents paying a company, I think it was, to get their kids into the university of their choice. And while that was in the US and I'm in the UK, being at a boarding school, I feel you came across some people who fitted that same stereotype of the people who did that. And so I just thought I had a bit of an insight on that, and it might be interesting to share. So anyway, what is the real tea on boarding school? I'm here to tell you. Does it live up to the stereotypes? Well, I'll let you decide. But basically, I went to boarding school, my brother went to boarding school, we went to two different ones. His was mixed gender, mine was all girls. We both went from age 13, so year 9, until the end of sixth form. We were at schools that included secondary school and sixth form in it, so we stayed at the same place for all of that. I think the first thing really is that a lot of boarding schools aren't actually just boarding schools. They have a lot of day pupils. At my school, only about 20% of people boarded, and then in sixth form that went up to maybe 60%. Whereas at my brother's school it was about 60% consistently the whole way through. I think that may have gone up a little bit as well at sixth form, but roughly 60%. So there's a lot of day pupils at boarding schools too. We also both went to schools that were within an hour's drive from our house, so we weren't like really cut off. I think a lot of people did actually live quite locally, and the only people who didn't really go home at weekends were people who lived internationally. And even then, they often had relatives or, people in the country that they would go stay with at the weekends a lot. I think one of the main thoughts about boarding school is that it's all like, late night pillow fights, dorm raids, midnight feasts. And I think we had a midnight feast once, just because it felt like something we had to do. We definitely got up to more Mischief lower down the school, but I only ever really stayed up late because I was just wasting time on the internet, or I had a lot of work to do because I was really bad at doing work at any time other than the night before, so it only ever happened during the night before. Just a quick example, during GCSEs, I had geography coursework, DT coursework, I think it was an English essay, and I was also helping tech the school production that was on that week. So every night after school I was basically straight to the theatre till about 10 o'clock, which didn't really give me any time to do my coursework, which was all due in at the end of the week, and I hadn't really gotten very far with at the beginning of the week, so I was basically up till about 4 or 5 o'clock every night. I snuck into the common room after lights out and would just sit in there and do my coursework until 4 or 5 in the morning. Every night. I wanted to die. So yeah, I feel lower down the school there was a bit more Mischief, but yeah, just limited midnight feasts. I mean, every year there was one day where people got up to Mischief, and that was the last night of term when the upper six leavers would have muck-up day. And I feel that's quite a common thing in general, not really specific to the school, but it was good fun. They would stay up all night, people who weren't boarders would come into school overnight, and they would basically trash the school, but not like properly trash it, just like mess it up a lot. And they sometimes broke into boarding, like the lower school boarding, and did stuff. One year they came around at like the crack of dawn with a bell waking us up, like the school lunch bell or something. And they were ringing that really loudly. I think that was my first year in boarding as well. But yeah, don't feel that's so specific to boarding schools. I think another big stereotype is the house system. Like Hogwarts, you have the houses like, getting points throughout the year, and then there's massive house cup at the end. We didn't really have that, but we did have houses. At my brother's school, your boarding house was also your day house. Like, the day pupils would have desks in the boarding rooms so that, they all gel together and socialise and everything. Whereas at my school, we had houses for the entire school, and then the boarding houses were literally just which area of the building you were in depending on what year you were in, so you kind of moved through the houses, as you got older. But there were a lot of house competitions for basically everything, like every single sport, drama, art, like everything there was a competition for, basically. There wasn't like some big house cup that you got at the end just for having won the most, but you got individual trophies at the end of each term depending on what competitions had been that term, and the house would win the trophies for those. You did have points given out for schoolwork, like I think, is it merit marks? I can't remember. But you'd have like the negative stuff like yellow slips for not handing in work on time or missing music lessons, and detention marks and detentions. And those were all added up at the end of each term, maybe? Yeah, there was definitely a list read out at the end of every term. And I think it was a termly cup that got given out, but also at the end of the year, I don't know. And so there was a cup for house points, but it wasn't such a big deal. I think all the houses cared more about the other like actual competitions than the house points cup. I think something that's quite surprising that not many people would think about is religion. I think most boarding schools are actually quite religious. Like my school and my brother's school, they both had their own chapels. For us, we had a service every Wednesday or Thursday, depending what year you were in, and then boarders had a Wednesday evening service, and if you were in on Sundays, you went to the church in the village. At my brother's school, I think they had them a bit more frequently. We also had a day off for our patron saint's day, because my school was named after a saint, and basically we had church or chapel in the morning, depending again what year you were in, and then in the afternoon we had big lacrosse competition. It was the house lacrosse competition, and basically each house played the other, and that determined on that day who won house lacrosse. There was the upper school and the lower school, so you could potentially, one house could potentially win 2 cups for lacrosse that day. And then in the evening it was all rounded off by a massive gala concert that a lot of the students performed in. So yeah, religion was like, I wasn't religious really, but it did feature a lot in my life as I grew up at that school. But talking of like the upper and lower school quite a bit, there was actually a bit of a difference in responsibilities. So like in the upper 6, students got prefect roles and actually had to like help out with things, and lower down the school, I think in year 9, there were monitor roles given out for things like having to help out, you know, organise the library, give out hymn sheets in chapel, and some of the prefect roles you had to do a lot more than others. Like my best friend, she was the prefect for the theatre auditorium area, and basically any assembly or anything where they were using some form of technology, more often than not she had to go down and help them figure out something technical because they couldn't figure it out themselves, and so she was constantly like having to sort things out. And like the head girls did a lot. There were definitely roles that had a lot more than others, but some of them were school-wide prefect positions and some were just house positions. And so you had like house drama, house singing person, someone who was responsible for the elements of all the different competitions that we had, and like someone who sorted out the teams for sports fixtures, for like the house sports competitions. And that was sort of the end of that. At my brother's school though, they actually had a bit more responsibility, like student to student. When they were lower down the school, I think, I don't know for like definite, but one of the younger boys had to bring the older ones the papers. Also, the older boys had to sit in during homework time with the younger boys in their dorms while they were doing their homework. There was a little bit on like the punishment end of things, like you get banned from going down to the village. They didn't do a huge amount at my school. Like detention wasn't really that big of a deal. Like, I mean, everyone was like, oh my god, detention, but it was actually only like litter pick for an hour and then, or like half an hour, and then write an essay about what you've done wrong. Wasn't a big deal. But I think at my brother's school they were a lot more enthusiastic about rules. Like if they're expelling someone, they're like letting everyone know they've done this wrong, so they're out. Whereas at my school I think only one girl was let go while I was at school, and they really like hushed it up kind of thing. So that was a bit of a difference. And also I think at both of our schools, lower down the school, you had to keep your phones in overnight. Not really like a punishment, just sort of like rules. There were definitely kids whose parents threw money at the school. I'm not really sure how much of a difference it actually made though. Like, maybe they tended to get a few more prizes, or like get positions, like prefect stuff, or I don't know. I can't really say I personally noticed stuff. I would say there might have been the odd rumour, but I don't feel, I mean maybe I was just unobservant, I don't feel it made a huge amount of difference. Did hear the odd rumour, and though definitely also on the other end of the scale there wasn't any looking down on anyone who had like less money. I know there was 1 or 2 cases where there were kids whose parents suddenly couldn't afford to pay the fees anymore, and the school actually let them stay on until the end of the year, so they didn't have to change schools like halfway through a year, which, you know, not bad of them. But yeah, if anything, the rumours were always about the kids whose parents had money and like connections and things, as opposed to the ones that didn't. So to talk about in relation to the scandals that's going on right now, there definitely were parents who threw money at the school. There were parents who came in at the slightest thing, had to go speak to the head teacher about it, had to call in constantly. There definitely were those parents at both my school and my brother's school. There were rumours of parents paying to get their kids into the school in the first place, as opposed to like sort of like looking over the fact that their grades might not have been good enough to pass the entrance exam. I don't know. Or whether that was just that their grades were maybe good enough, but their parents just donated a good amount of money just to make sure. I don't know. There were rumours, but never anything concrete. But to the best of my knowledge, there weren't actually any rumours about people having their parents pay or donate anything to get them into university. And to be honest, like, it was a good education, and most people's grades were alright when they came out. Like, there was a lot of pressure on grades. We had sort of like internal marking sort of like scheme throughout most of school, where you would get graded against everyone else in your year. So even if you did really well on a paper, if everyone else in your year did really well on a paper, you might still get a really bad grade just because they were marking against anyone else, which was really horrible. But I guess it worked, kind of. I don't know, we had a lot of my year got into very good universities. I came out with a BCD and the school was horrified, told me I would not get into a university, and spoiler alert, I got into university, and it wasn't a bad one either. I actually turned up and my grades were on the higher end of what everyone else had. So I don't know anyone who's actually done it, but just knowing the types of people and the parents who were at those schools, you know, the rumours about parents who were doing their kids' homework all the way up, like, through GCSEs and maybe even into A-levels, kids who just had a complete disregard for, you know, the value and the worth of, like, their property, rumours about parents being constantly on the phone with teachers if their kids didn't get something, or, you know, weren't doing things right or whatever, like just trying to smooth over problems. Like, it was all rumours to me, but I can very much have an idea of the kind of person that would possibly do that sort of thing. And I think one of the main points for me that sort of struck a chord is the discussion over whether the kids themselves are to blame at all. You've got some people saying that obviously it wasn't the kids' fault, like it's the parents, you know, there's a lot of pressure anyway from parents for kids to get good grades, get into school. There's so much more pressure nowadays for that sort of thing. And so, you know, naturally the parents want their kids in the best school. The kid might not want to go to that school, and then when the parent hands them on a silver platter, they're like, great, gotta go. And I kind of agree to an extent. Like, I mostly agree. But then there's those saying that the kids know what's happening. They should know that that's wrong. They're not stupid. Like, they've had a good education. So yes, they should be held to blame as well. And I sort of agree with that as well. Basically, I feel it's a bit of a mixture. Obviously, the parents are largely at fault, but if you really think about it from the kid's perspective, they've probably grown up learning that if they have a problem, go to mummy and daddy and they can fix it. Mummy and daddy hand them things on a silver platter being like, yes, have this, it's fine. They come up with the slightest thing, they want something, their parents can get it for them. You know, their parents can do anything for them or solve any problem for them. You know, they have luxury holidays, holiday homes. Some of them even get dropped off at school by helicopter, or they have servants back at home. Like, they have everything and they don't really need to think about anything. Like, some of them probably, their home life, their real life seems very disconnected from their school life and what they learn at school about what is right and wrong. Like, I feel like to some of these people, the idea of spending money to get into university probably wouldn't feel that wrong. It might even be quite natural. Like, if your parents are doing it, like the people that you usually look up to and admire and respect most in the world, if they're doing it, how wrong can it be? So that would be the parents' upbringing, their fault, right? Well, yes, but also no. They've had a very good education. They know what's right and wrong. I think it's back to what I said about them just not seeing it as wrong, like it being disconnected from their real life. I feel like for a lot of people, it probably doesn't even cross their mind to even think about whether what they're doing is right or wrong. Like, if they hear about someone doing that, they'd probably be like, oh, that's bad. But when they're the ones doing it, when it's their parents, it probably doesn't even cross their mind. And I just think it takes a certain type of person to not only have some like really deep self-reflection and actually think past what their parents have said, oh yeah, we've got this for you, this is, you can have this, you can do this, to think past that and really introspectively like look and acknowledge that it's wrong. And then not only that, but then to go against what your family has done and given for you when they've done nothing but try to get things for you, have the best for you, to then go against that. And not only go against that, but when they're handing you this really amazing thing, to then turn around and be like, morally I object, even if you might want that thing. I think it takes a really like, it's a really strong character that's going to turn around after even having thought about it and go through all of that and then turn around and still say no out of morals. And unfortunately, I just don't think that strength of character is really all that common. So yeah, I think it is largely the parents' fault, but also the kids are to blame, because if nothing's done, these people are going to end up like their parents. They're going to end up thinking it's okay still, and they will end up in the same position when they're their parents' age, doing the exact same things, and it just won't stop. Yeah, I don't really want to get like too much into this whole scandal thing. I think just because I went to a boarding school, private school, and I also then studied psychology, and I find it very interesting looking at why people do what they do, is why I sort of like had this little diversion onto the topic of, you know, all this scandal stuff. But I hope in general you found this video interesting. Let me know in the comments if there have been any myths that you've kind of been believing for ages that I have now busted. And hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye! I don't know why I'm still drinking this tea, it's so cold.